2 millennia, fires, earthquakes, empires collapsing, and barbarians at the gates. Everything around it turned to rubble and dust. Yet, this building, a massive concrete drum crowned by a hole in the sky, stands today virtually unchanged. This is not just architecture, this is the story of history's ultimate survivor. To understand how the Pantheon survived, you first have to understand how it died. Twice. The story begins not with a dome, but with a standard Roman temple commissioned by Marcus Agrippa in 27 BC. It was a beautiful but typical structure, dedicated to the gods and honoring the first emperor, Augustus. But early Roman buildings were often victims of their own city's density. In 80 AD, a great fire swept through the Campus Martius and reduced Agrippa's structure to ash. It was rebuilt, only to be struck by lightning and burned down again in 110 AD. The site was cursed. The structure was fragile. Any other location would have been abandoned to ruin. But then came the architect-emperor Hadrian. A philosopher and a lover of all things Greek, Hadrian decided to rebuild it one last time, not as a standard temple, but as something revolutionary. He didn't just replace the building, he engineered a survival mechanism into its very bones. And he did it using a single, incredible material, Roman concrete. We're all used to concrete today, but the Romans' version, what we call opus cementitium, was different. It was an engineering secret that allowed them to do the impossible. Hadrian used this ancient concrete to cast the entire interior space, creating a perfect sphere, 43 meters wide, 43 meters high. It was a representation of the universe with its single central opening, the oculus, as the sun. But how do you make a dome that massive stand up without any internal supports? The genius is in the weight. The further up the dome you go, the lighter the material gets. At the base, they used dense travertine and heavy rock. Higher up, they swapped that for lighter, porous volcanic rock like tufa. And right at the top, near the oculus, they used pumice, a stone so light it almost floats. It's a trick of decreasing density, a kind of internal balancing act that transfers the weight perfectly, allowing the dome to essentially hold itself up. This structural trick is amplified by the magnificent sunken panels or coffers covering the dome's interior. Most people assume the coffers are merely decorative, but they are crucial. By carving out 5 rings of 28 recessed squares, over 140 cuts of diminishing size, the builders removed huge amounts of weight from the shell. The coffer system works like a permanent internal skeleton, distributing stress and reducing overall mass by approximately a third. They are the visible signature of its internal engineering safety net. Hadrian also built massive brick relieving arches and voids into the cylindrical walls, the drum beneath the dome. These aren't hidden, they're woven into the structure to redistribute the massive downward and outward thrust, diverting pressure away from weak points. It's a system of checks and balances designed to anticipate failure over millennia. This wasn't just construction, it was a cosmic, concrete, and gravity-defying feat. Hadrian built it to last forever. But the true test of time came not from engineering, but from faith. And here is the truly hidden detail. The columns on the porch, those single-piece granite monoliths, were originally intended to be even taller. Hadrian's builders ran into logistical hell. They sourced the columns from Egypt, transported them on barges across the Mediterranean, and hauled them up the Tiber River. But when they reached Rome, they realized the columns they had were a few meters too short for the original plan, forcing them to make the portico slightly shallower than intended, a perfect monument built around a shipping error. By the 5th century, the Roman Empire was collapsing. The barbarian invasions weren't just attacks on cities, they were attacks on symbols. Across Rome, pagan temples were looted, defiled, and torn apart for their valuable marble, bronze, and stone. The ancient world was being recycled into the medieval world. The Temple of Jupiter, the Temple of Venus, all of them fell into ruin. But the Pantheon survived the single most destructive force in its history: neglect and theft. Why? Because of a single diplomatic move in 609 AD. The Byzantine Emperor Phocas gave the structure to Pope Boniface IV. The Pope did what was considered unthinkable at the time. He didn't tear it down, he consecrated it, dedicating it to Christian martyrs, giving it a new life, Santa Maria ad Martyrs. This change in status was the ultimate survival strategy. It meant the building was no longer a pagan monument to be destroyed. It was a holy place to be protected. The switch was strategic. By moving the bones of martyrs from the Roman catacombs into the Old Temple, the Pope effectively performed a spiritual exorcism, driving out the pagan deities and ensuring the structure could not be destroyed for purely religious reasons. However, even the Church sometimes cannibalized its own. Over the centuries, popes stripped the building of some of its ancient materials. The gorgeous gilded bronze tiles that covered the dome's exterior were removed by the Byzantine Emperor Constans II in the 7th century. He was so thorough that he even tried to ship them back to Constantinople, only for his loot to be seized in Sicily. And perhaps the most famous piece of theft occurred in the 17th century when Pope Urban VIII removed the massive bronze rafters from the portico ceiling, some 200 tons of metal, to use for Bernini's baldacchino over the altar in St. Peter's Basilica. This monumental looting, sanctioned by a pope, sparked outrage, giving rise to the famous quote often attributed to a Roman passerby at the time, "Quod non fecerunt barbari, fecerunt barbarini." What the barbarians did not do, the Barberini, Urban VIII's family name, did. It's a bitter epitaph to the price of preservation, trading the ancient integrity of one building for the glory of another. Despite these colossal losses, the structure itself, Hadrian's original shell, remained intact. The continuous unbroken use as a church was its permanent guardian. Here's a fact few realize. The Pantheon's floor is concave. It dips inward toward the center. This is a subtle but essential part of the original design. Because the oculus is always open, rain and snow fall directly onto the floor. The Romans installed 22 drainage holes across the floor's surface, and the entire floor slopes inward to ensure that any water flows directly into the ancient drainage system below, keeping the structure dry to this day. If you are enjoying this deep dive into the secrets of Roman survival, kindly like and subscribe. It helps us bring more incredible stories of engineering and history right to you. The Pantheon's job as a survivor wasn't done. After the unification of Italy in the late 19th century, it took on a new secular role as a national mausoleum. It became the final resting place of Italy's first kings, Victor Emmanuel II and his son Umberto I. But the most famous person interred there is none of them. It's Raphael, the Renaissance master. When he died in 1520, he asked to be buried in the Pantheon, a testament to how revered the building was even then, a flawless symbol of the classical perfection he tried to emulate. Raphael's tomb started a trend, with many other renowned Renaissance artists and architects choosing the Pantheon as their final resting place, including Annibale Carracci and Baldassare Peruzzi. They wanted their eternity to be spent in what they considered the perfect human-made structure. What's truly magical is how the building still tells time. On April 21st, the traditional founding day of Rome, the sun shining through the oculus hits a metallic grille directly above the main entrance. This moment of solar alignment was designed to frame the emperor in a column of light as he stood in the doorway, creating a magnificent, almost divine spectacle for the crowd gathered outside. It was a yearly reminder of the emperor's connection to the heavens, turning the structure into a piece of imperial propaganda. Today, the Pantheon is more than a church or a tomb. It's a living textbook. It's the reason we understand what Roman concrete was truly capable of. Its engineering secrets are still being studied. Modern buildings like St. Peter's Basilica, the U.S. Capitol Dome, and countless others all owe a debt to Hadrian's blueprint. The Pantheon is the ultimate ancestor of domed architecture worldwide. When you stand inside and look up at the oculus, you're not just looking at a hole in the roof. You're looking at a solution that has defeated every structural challenge for 2,000 years. You're looking at the reason this building refused to be a ruin. It survived not just the barbarians, but the very force of time and gravity itself. It is quite simply the building that wouldn't die. The Pantheon's inscription, M. Agrippa LF Causium Tertium Fecit, translates to Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, consul for the third time, built it. This is one of the world's most deliberate cases of misattribution. Hadrian, in a gesture of humility or clever politics, chose to permanently honor the original builder, Agrippa, even though the building we see today is almost entirely Hadrian's design, built a century and a half later. What part of the Pantheon's incredible story surprised you the most? The concrete genius, the survival as a church, or the bronze theft? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to keep exploring the massive engineering feats of the ancient world, make sure you like and subscribe for more Mega Builds history.